This is the North Star Sports Show with ET&B.
Welcome back to part 2 of this however many part series we decided to do of high school sports in Minnesota. We just did a boys basketball side of things. Now we're going to go to the girls basketball side of things. Starting off with Class A yet again. It is BBE, Belgrade Brutinel Rosa. They're 8-0 right now, scoring about 68.5 points per game, only allowing 30 points per game. And like you mentioned, that 60 mark's kind of where you want to ride for points per game, and under 55, usually a good recipe. They're holding teams to 30. That's by far the best.
It's a pretty dominant defense. At about 8-0, I mean, the average is starting to come out true. You get the chance to play some of those better teams like we've talked about over and over, but it's sitting about 30, what points giving up?
30
even. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
That's a good day for a football team. You're holding that to that when people can score hundreds of points in this game. That's good defense. It's wild.
Yeah, and if you think about it, splitting up into two halves, that's only 15 points per half. So that's pretty darn good for any team in basketball in high school. So they're doing pretty well. And then number 2 is Henning. They're 9-1. They're averaging about 66 points per game, giving up about 40. That's another good spread right there, about 25 points. They're a pretty good team. Only got one loss on the season, so they're there for a reason. In third, it's Heritage Christian at 8-1, scoring about 61, a little bit lower, but they hold their opponents to 40.2 points per game. Again, kind of like we mentioned, just sometimes you just kind of sit on the lead and you don't really need to do too much more than just get your lead, sit on it. Don't necessarily need to rush things. Don't necessarily need to, the basket's open. Well, maybe pass it a couple more times and then drive to the basket instead of taking all the three-point shots.
That, and I mean, we're going from school to school, and it's really only, besides the big outliers, only about 6 to 10 points. So, I mean, really, it's only a couple more points in this game, 2-3 here, 2-3 there, and it'll change the average. So it's not like their whole philosophy is setting the ball,
Right.
but it's they have someone that makes a higher percentage of three-pointers or something like that, where they average just a little bit better shooting out of some players than another team, is some of the statistics, I would think.
Yeah, I'd say that plays into it, definitely. Moving on to number 4, it's Mayor Lutheran. They're sitting at 8-1 on the season, scoring about 71 points per game and giving up about 44 to 45 points per game. They're doing pretty well. Then number 5 is Mountain Iron Buell. They are 6-2. They are scoring about 72 points per game and give up 44.5 points per game. That rounds out the top 5, but then some schools that are around our area. Bram, they are tied at 27th. Now, I remember back in the kind of mid-2000s to like 2014, 15, it seemed like Bram, both boys and girls basketball teams, were at state and winning it almost every year, it seemed like.
Bram was always so good, and I would avoid going to Bram basketball games against us because, didn't need to see that, but they're always a good team, and now that we're out of high school, can say, it's nice to see them win, go and do things, and keep winning in communities around the area.
Right, and, one thing I was looking at, the Bram boys basketball team won their last state championship back in, I think, the 2015-16 season, or it was 14-15 season, and they were averaging like 90 points per game, and it was like, ooh, ouch. Some of the games that they played against us, it was like, oh, man, that's tough to see, that's tough. Let's scroll past that. Let's not watch that again. But, so the Bram girls doing pretty well this season, kind of getting back on track, so to speak. 8-2, scoring about 60 points per game. So, again, not too high scoring, but they're right there. They can get it done, both on defense and on offense. Just, maybe they haven't need to score as much because, again, they're playing a lot of teams from this conference, and you only have, a shorter season, 16, 17, 18 game schedule, so these games matter a lot more. And, some schools around this area, unfortunately, in the conference, I should say, they can't put up the points. They're just not as competitive. And, unfortunately, Bram's just kind of bullying some of those teams, and they're just doing what they do, and they don't have to put up the points. So, maybe they're kind of reserving themselves so as to, not do too much and then get themselves out of position. They're a good team that I'd watch out for them in the playoffs. And then here's a surprise. Talk about being the butt of jokes for around Pine City. Ogilvy. I think the town's population is about 280 people, if that. They are ranked 40th right now in Class Single A, and they're 6-2. They score about 62 points per game. Surprisingly competitive.
And, I mean, if you look at them, they're a small school, and maybe they got that needle in the haystack. Maybe they found the one or two players they can need to be competitive against some of these bigger schools. Being as they are so small, I mean, I can't imagine they could fill out a full, 30-man roster,
right?
Like some of the bigger schools can. But, I mean, hard work and being able to outlast most people will get you a long ways, and hopefully they can just push in the final push in the playoffs. It'd be awesome to see them go all the way to state. I would root for Ogilvy the whole way if they got to state.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, after high school, you just kind of start to root for these teams because your ego drops a little bit, and then you're like, oh, it's kind of cool to root for them because you get to see that school around yours, and it's like, oh, they're doing good. So, but yeah, just doing really well. And like you said, sometimes, it just takes a couple of years with those younger players, and you got to go through those tough years, and then you get that senior class of about 3 or 4, and they're leading the team, and that's why they're so good. And sometimes that can translate into the younger people who are playing, maybe they're seniors, and then it's translating to the juniors and the sophomores and the freshmen. And like you said, probably can't fill out a 30-man roster, but, 15 solid players who are going to work their butts off is probably a lot better than having, 30 who only kind of care. So, then to Hinckley Finlayson, they're ranked 58th. They're up and down. They're 4-5. They're scoring about 45.5 points per game. It's kind of like the Vikings a couple years ago. They're winning the games they should. They're losing the games that are tough.
And, I mean, it's just kind of the way teams are sometimes. You get those good games, bad games, and sometimes you're at the average. You're at that middle ground where, like you said, you win the ones you should. You'll lose the ones that you probably weren't going to win. But you like to be competitive in those losses. I don't, off the top of my head, don't know the scores of the losses. I couldn't tell you if they're competitive or not.
It's here and there. It's here and there. So,
okay, well, and I mean, they're playing hard. Not that no one's not playing hard,
right.
But they're playing these better teams hard. And like you said, maybe it helps translate down to some of the younger kids. Sometimes some of the younger kids, they come in a little spunky. They need to take some of those L's and learn to be humble and learn to grow and get better. It sucks as the seniors that they every senior can't have an amazing year and have those state runs every year, but sometimes it helps those seniors learn to help build some of the younger people, and maybe they get some of that if they go to a college and play, and they can turn around and kind of use what they learned with building people and having help.
Yeah, to kind of touch on that real quick, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's a tough year, and you just kind of got to swallow that pill and say, okay, it's a tough year. But then you got to kind of look past that and kind of take pride in the fact that you could help this team grow for the future. It might be a tough year for you right now, but you could possibly help this team grow next year and get to that state, or the year after that and get to state. And then you have that pride of you set the tone. You set the tone of how it's going to be and how it has to be done to get there. So sometimes you just got to swallow that hard pill and, swallow the pride and just help your team build for the future. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever going to look at it that way because they're going to be like, no, I want my time. But again, sometimes it's not how it goes, unfortunately. But moving on to Class AA now. At number 1 is Stewartville. They're 8-0, scoring about 67 points per game, giving up about 48. So that's a pretty good average right there, pretty good spread. Again, they're 8-0, and it's been a pretty competitive schedule. It's not here, it's not there, it's not, oh, they're playing everybody competitive, but it's not, oh, everyone they're playing is absolutely just garbage. But
like you touched on it earlier, I can't wait for the playoffs. There's a lot of very good teams, and I can't wait to watch them play each other because it's a lot of these teams, they don't have each other in the schedules, and it's kind of a shame that way. But
Yeah.
I can't wait for the playoffs. There's a couple hockey teams that are scoring outrageous, and I can't wait to watch that gun show go off. And some of these basketball teams, it's going to be wild points in a wild playoff season, I believe.
It really is, and it's going to be interesting because we talk about all these teams who are 7-0 or 1-loss, 2-loss teams, and it's like, man, come playoff time when the best of the best get together to play each other, it's just going to be such good basketball to watch. And again, we will keep you updated on that. We'll do an episode probably before and during and maybe even after playoffs happen. So Minnesota State High School League, wasn't sure if they were going to have a section in the state tournament. They are. Basketball, I believe, starts middle to end of March. Wrestling is around the same time. It's all kind of around the same time frame. I think that what they're doing is trying to get everything done so that they can start spring sports at a decent time instead of pushing it all the way back. I think they were originally scheduled to start in May or June, and then they were going to push it all to like the beginning of August to end. So I think they're trying to get everything to where it ends at a decent time. That way they have that, 2-week break that they're supposed to have, and then get to spring sports. Of course, we live in Minnesota. There could still be snow on the ground come May in the last weekend. So we don't know. Spring sports may not happen, but not due to COVID either. But number 2 is Minnehaha Academy. They're 7-1, 74 to 75 points per game, give up 48. That's pretty common. Minnehaha Academy is extremely good. They're always in the state conversation. They just seem to breed athletes for every sport, not just basketball, but every sport, and they're very good, very competitive. One loss, don't hold that against them. Come playoff time, they'll probably be the number 1 seed, honestly.
And another thing with these schools that go the back-to-back champions, and they're always 7, 8, 9, 10-0 and whatnot, a lot of that goes to the coaching too, because it takes time to build these younger players up so that they can be those same type caliber players. You talk about turnovers. There's some schools I feel like they never have a turnover after a big class. They're still just as competitive, and that's all coaching. It's all making sure your players are doing what they need to get better, advancing in their life, and it's just good on coaches, good on coaching staff, and good on the school for keeping them academically okay to be able to play every day.
Right, yeah, that's got to be something that weighs on a coach a lot, too, Got to make sure that they're, good enough to get that playing time or, put them up on a higher, instead of C squad, they go to JV, or maybe from JV instead they go to varsity, How many times have we seen an 8th grader start varsity and then they're, breaking records? So it's tough to be a coach, especially as a high school coach, mainly in Minnesota, because you're not making the millions of dollars like the Texas high school football coaches are, getting $5 million a year just to coach. These are teachers. These are people who are taking their extra time to go out and, help these young athletes not just grow in their sport, but grow as people. And it takes a lot out of them sometimes, because sometimes you get that one kind of tough kid who you have to deal with, and you're trying to groom to be good, and usually it works out because the coaches are just so great. They take so much time to just make sure everything's going well and make sure you're doing well. Some do, not all, but most. And yeah, good shout out to all the state high school coaches, not just in Minnesota, in every state, because you're doing a good job of sacrificing your time and some money too to help your team grow. So again, shout out to all the coaches. Then number 3 is Duluth Marshall. They're at 8-1. They're scoring 82 points per game. That is easily the top scoring team in Class AA. They're only giving up 60 points per game. Kind of a cool story. I was at this game. Pine City, our alma mater, they hosted Duluth Marshall. And a senior on Duluth Marshall, her name is Grace Neatkins, she was 11 points away from her 3,000th career point. 3,000. Now, the record for the state of Minnesota is like 5,400. Mm-hmm. So she's a little ways with it from that. Not going to be able to get that in her career. I forgot who holds it, but yeah, I think she started as a 7th grader, and she finished with 5,487, something like that. But she was from Bram. So, and she was part of those championships that we talked about. But she was 11 points. She got it in the first half easily. Then she went on to score 51. 51 of the 86 points her teams had. Her teammates only were able to score 35 points in that game.
Did someone say call Kobe? That is a ridiculous stat. In high school, in professional basketball, you see it sometimes. Like Kobe had those big games, and you see these big name players doing it. But in high school, it's like, oh, okay, I'll just go back on the bus.
Right.
She's got it. No, we don't need a team here.
Yeah, and I think that's when you can really tell that, okay, she's something special. Because she wasn't just being selfish. She was doing a very good job of passing the ball around, going out back on defense and defending. So she did it all. She wasn't being selfish. She was just very good. So easily got her 3,000th point. Now she's trying to work her way into the top 10. I think she needed 260 points before the season ended to get there. And I looked at her average. Think she's going to get it. So she should work her way into the top 10, maybe even top 5 before the season's over, if she can get into the playoffs and they can push their way through a little bit deeper. But they're ranked 3rd. And then in 4th is the team they lost to now. So now Duluth Marshall, they have one loss. It's to this team, ranked number 4 right now. That's ESCO. ESCO is 7-0. Again, they beat Duluth Marshall. ESCO is only scoring 58.8 points per game, but they only give up 38 points per game.
That's good defense. Like we've talked about, it's just good defense. Hanging on to the ball, taking your time, and just pulling out as much time as you can when you shoot. And a lot of passing, I'm assuming, a lot of assists off people. But just good defense, making sure that no one's shooting on you, blocking, playing tight coverage on them, not letting much go on. I'm going to assume they're pretty good in the paint then, too. Being big and physical up there, not letting the easy drive-ins. Must be playing some pretty good coverage on the outsides for the threes. Just probably really solid defense.
Yeah, and I think that game, the final score was 51-49. I think it was a really close game, or maybe 52-49. It was a super close game, and obviously ESCO is there is a reason they're up there in the top 5. So, yeah, that was their Duluth Marshall's lone loss. And if I'm looking right now at a team to be favored, in my opinion, it's Duluth Marshall and Grace Neepkins. Man, they were so good in the game I watched. It seemed like every three she was just, it was easy. But again, so many good classes, so much competitiveness. Then at 5, it's another undefeated team. This team is not too far from schools that we played against. We never played them personally, but they play against Mora, who is up and down. But Albany, they're 9-0, scoring about 70 points per game and only giving up 38 to 39 points per game. So pretty good spread there, and they played some competitive teams, St. Cloud Cathedral, Mora, Foley, Malacca. They play Piers, so they're playing some of these competitive teams. So there's another team that could really come to the playoffs and just run through people.
And kind of piggybacking off the last school, they both hold opponents about 38 points. Maybe they score a bit more. Maybe they have those threes and land a bit more often. Maybe that's what the difference here is. Who they play-wise, that's obviously where the seeding is. And I would say in the top 15 seeding, it matters, but it's a dartboard, I feel like, sometimes. Like we talked about earlier in the men's basketball. Someone beat Pine City and still went down the ranks. Yeah. So I feel like it's kind of like a dartboard, but right. Top 15 teams, I think they're all very competitive and could just take it if they wanted to. They have a good enough game.
They really could, and that's kind of what's unfortunate about the sections is the fact that, it's like 8 to 9 to 10 teams, so you never really get the matchup that you want to see. It's like, oh, they should really need to play that team. They're so even, but sometimes that's just how it rolls. Anyway, so we'll move on to Pine City. Again, our alma mater, if I can speak English. They are 9-1. Again, their lone loss to Duluth Marshall, who is ranked number 3. They score about 75.3 points per game. Now, they did have a game where they scored over 100 points, and they held the team to, I think, 15 or 18. It was like 105 to 18 or 108 to 18, something like that. It was outrageous, but that was kind of one of those games where it was like, okay, Pine City's just that much better. Unfortunately, they have the talent, they have the depth, and it's really unfortunate to see those kind of games because it's like, man, you know which way it's going to go before it even starts, but you want the other team to be competitive and stay in it, and they did. They did a very good job, not hanging their heads, still going full bore even at the end of the game when it was super lopsided. So, but Pine City, I feel like they're a team, again, like you said, the top 15. Now they're ranked 40th, but again, it's in the section, and I think in their section there's about 10 to 12 teams. I mean, it's really a toss-up to who actually, because again, seeding matters to a point, maybe just based off, home field advantage, but you have it and you don't this year because at home you have a couple more fans, but sometimes they just don't want to go for safety reasons. So it's, like you said, it's really a toss-up this year, but Pine City, I'm going to say, be one to watch for. Then also in Double A, ranked 72nd is Rush City. They've had an up and down season. They've won some games, they've lost some games. They're I can't get a grasp of their team right now. They're only scoring about 47.5 points per game, but it's like they're 5-4. I mean, I don't know. I can't quite grasp, what their team is yet.
Maybe it's kind of like that when you're talking about Hinckley and the men kind of scenario where they can be bursty when they need to, and when they're maybe down by a couple, they can burst up and get those 8-10 points, and then I'm assuming they're playing pretty decent defense to be 5-4 and only scoring 40-some points a game. So maybe they can get up a little bit, and they're just a bit harder to score on than normal, taking some teams by surprise. They come in, and maybe other teams are looking at averages, coaches are, and they're not ready for a stingy type defense. So they come and play it big, and maybe they're just rocking out like that. Some quick scores, just some long dominant defense, and it'll win. Like you said, defense wins championships.
Yeah, it does. It'll be interesting to see if I actually get to call a game for them, so to kind of get a grasp of what kind of team they are. But again, they could just be that team that goes on a couple runs here and there. Now to shift to Class 3A. That, again, yes, we can count. Hill Murray is ranked number 1 in Class 3A right now at 8-1, 64 to 65 points per game, and they allow 37. Then at number 2, here's where it gets just insane. Number 2, Becker. Now, they're 8-0, so again, I'm not a mathematician or a scientist. I don't know how they're ranked number 2 below Hill Murray. But Becker is scoring 89 points per game and only allowing 33 and a half.
I guess that's probably that's got to be a schedule thing. It's got to be, maybe they're not playing what the system believes is not talented teams, because, I don't know, I can't help you with that one.
Well, again, they are in the Mississippi 8, so again, the Mississippi 8 this year for basketball-wise isn't extremely competitive like it usually is. The Mississippi 8 conference is kind of having a down year, kind of like the NFC East in football. It's just there are a lot of teams who are just kind of struggling this year to get things going. Other than Princeton. Princeton is very good this year. Princeton, I don't think I put them on the list because they're not in the top 5 or top 10, and they're not a school that we played a lot, but they're very good. They're averaging, again, kind of like Becker, in boys basketball, I should say, about 88 points per game, but in girls, it's just, for both boys and girls basketball, the Mississippi 8 Conference this year is just, it's kind of having a down year, unfortunately, but Becker is taking advantage of that.
Which, I mean, you always have a school that takes advantage of it when you got 3, 4, 5 schools that are struggling a little bit. One will always have a good year. But unlike the NFC East, they will actually recover and not still just stay at the bottom of the pack here. They will get better.
It will. But yeah, so they're ranked second. Then it's number 3, Mankato West at 8-1, 63 points per game, give up about 44. Then it's Matamidi at number 4, 8-1 again, about 70 points per game. They give up about 43. Then at number 5, it is Holy Angels Academy. They are 8-0, scoring about 80 points per game, and they only give up about 44 points per game. Again, that's kind of like the Mississippi 8. They're taking advantage of a weak conference this year. That's kind of what it is this year, unfortunately. But then I want to touch on North Branch real quick, because we talked about this while we were looking it up. And it's rough. Now, again, they're in the Mississippi 8 Conference with Becker. Their North Branch is surprisingly only 47th. They're 2-7. They average about 39.8. Could say 40, but I'm going to keep it at 39.8 because they give up 64 points per game. That is a big translation into why they're 2-7. 2 of their games they played Becker already, so they've got that out of the way. But they lost to Becker, I believe it was the first game, 95-28, and then in the second game it was like 93-27. So the conference, again, just tough this year for some teams. And again, it could be COVID, it could just be a down year for them. We don't know. But then I want to touch on a team that is just insane. Now, granted, they've only played 5 games. It hasn't been super competitive. They have played some pretty weak teams. No offense to those teams, but they played some pretty weak teams. This team is ranked 18th in Class 3A right now. They average 100 points per game. Not 99.8, not 99.7, and even 100. And they only give up 27 points per game. I think I told you one of them was like 105-8.
Yeah, no. And hopefully that is just a statistic thing that'll breed itself out of this. Because if they can continue doing this, and this isn't just some rough teams, and they can go into the postseason carrying on this kind of average and points and defense.
That's a lot of no.
That's all the no. That's not even a lot. That's all of the no there.
That team, by the way, is St. Paul Como Park. I've never seen that. But again, only 5 games. Their schedule is a lot smaller than a lot of the schools, but weaker teams. But again, if they can carry that, even if their average does dip to around 88, still a defense like that, that's gonna be tough. Moving on to Class 4A, Hopkins. Who else is going to be number 1? It's always Hopkins. Hopkins is, they breed Division I players. Right now they're 8-0, 77 to 78 points per game. They give up about 49. That's Hopkins. There you go. Number 2 is Stillwater. They're 9-0, 74 points per game. They only give up about 40. So they're pretty competitive this year. They're a good team. Watch out for them. Farmington is number 3 at 9-0, 61 points per game. They give up about 39 points per game. Then it's Chaska at 4 with 8-0, 78 points per game. 38 points per game is what they give up. Now they're leading Class 4A at the top 5 anyways, with points per game at 78. Then at number 5 is Centennial, 9-0, 68.5 points per game is what they score. They give up about 50. So, again, just a lot of competitive teams in this Class 4A. All around it's going to be competitive and interesting to watch, but this 4A class especially is going to be interesting because one of the schools that is around our area, Cambridge Isani, they had a really good year last year. They made it to the state tournament. They, unfortunately, I felt so bad for them. They got seeded against Hopkins. Ooh, and Paige Beckers was there, and yeah, that's how that went. Hopkins won that one, unfortunately, and I will say this, Cambridge Isani gave them a run for their money there in the first half, but the talent-wise and the depth kind of came out in the second half. I digress, though. Cambridge Isani's having another good season. They're ranked 17th right now in Class 4A. They're 7-1. Here's where the defense comes in, and this is where I think this is a team where they rely more on defense than anything, because they only score about 52 to 53 points per game, and they give up 44.
And maybe that's what you need for some of these bigger schools. I'm not saying that's what will win, but maybe you got to shut some of these offenses down. Maybe they're not. You wouldn't want to say they're not ready for physical teams, because at 4A you have everybody that's big and everybody that's ready for this kind of stuff. But maybe they're scheming better. Maybe just a little bit of a coaching thing here. They got a good defensive mind with the coach, and he's got some tricks he's pulling out of his hat, maybe saving for the state championship, maybe? Maybe,
because I know there was one game. They played Monticello, who was usually pretty good. That was a defense battle. It went into overtime. They were tied at 32. They won that game 39-33, so that just kind of shows you that they don't need to score a whole lot. They'll hold you, and then they'll go and get the win at the end, so they're doing pretty well. So then we'll quickly move on, before we end this video, to some of the high school players from Minnesota who are playing D1 basketball this year, starting with Jalen Suggs from Minnehaha Academy. He is playing at Gonzaga, as I mentioned. They're 18 games into their season. He's shooting about 51.4% from field goal. He scores about 14 points per game, so not bad. He had a season high of 27 points against Iowa, who is pretty competitive in the Big Ten this year. So that's pretty good. I love seeing these kids. Now, he had the option to go play football or basketball, D1. He chose basketball because just lately all these freshmen are going in the first round, which I'm not a fan of. I think you need to stay at the school a little bit longer. Not only that, go get your education. The money's going to be there in basketball. It's not going anywhere. Go get your education, finish it out. Not only that, go win some championships in college. That's an experience you only get once. And I don't know. Personally, I would love to see these kids wait, but money talks, I guess.
I would agree with that too. Stay for a few years, yeah. Because if you go right from high school to professional sports, you go from my bank account looks like pennies on the dollar to I can't count that many zeros. There's a lot of kids that can deal with it and everything, but they're just gonna, I feel like, have a rougher time transitioning into that kind of thing, and you have a little more experience if you stay longer. You get experience playing against better players. You learn to grow from one system to another instead of just like coming in, you're just off the seat player, come back to the bench, off the seat player, come back to the bench. And I don't know, I think it's a benefit to the player to stay longer. And like you said, with the education too, you can never go wrong. I mean, you can always go back, but
right.
You're already there.
Yeah.
I have to go through everything again.
Exactly. And then Henry Abraham, he played at Cambridge Isani last year. He was a part of that very good team that actually won their section championship against Duluth East. He is playing at Eastern Illinois. He is as well 18 games into their season. He's 34.3% from field goal range. He is scoring about 6 points per game. He had a season high of 16 points against Tennessee State. So not a bad year. Kind of, he's not a starter, but he's getting his minutes, and he's making the most of them right now. And then we go to the record breaker, the absolute, just write her a Hall of Fame letter now. Get her golden jacket ready, because that's what she is. She is playing her mind out. I think she broke a record for breaking freshman records in one season or something. It's just ridiculous. Paige Becker's from Hopkins last year. She is playing at UConn right now. They have one loss on the season, but, just super competitive other than that. They're only 15 games into the season, but she is scoring 56.7% from field goal range, 55% from three-point range. She is 80% from free throw. She scores about 21 points per game. Yeah, 21 as a freshman. And her season high, she had 32 points against St. John's, New York. She has one game under 10 points, and 3 games under 15.
That's wild. That's one of those once-in-a-lifetime generation talents. Amazing she's coming from Minnesota. I love to see that, and like you said, I think this is the first basketball player I've heard that is making more. The percentage is better than Brady's Super Bowl win percentage. Going back to that, but it's amazing, and I hope she keeps going good, keeps just building on that kind of mountain of talent that she has, and being it so close, it's extra cool to follow it and see where it goes.
Lame claim to fame. I called a game with her playing in it, so yeah. But I think that wraps up this video. We'll continue on with hockey and wrestling in another video. So 2-3 more parts. I don't know. We'll see how many videos we got to do. We don't like to make them too long for y'all, because seeing two guys sit on a couch next to each other talking for 30, 40 minutes is probably long enough for you. But again, we appreciate you watching. Give us a like, share it. We're going to try and get these up on YouTube as soon as we can. Again, busy. We have full-time jobs that we're working. No excuses, though. We got to get it out to you, our fans. Don't worry, we'll get it out to you sooner rather than later. But again, that is the girls basketball high school update here on the North Star Sports Show with ET&B.